Imagine being dropped into the single largest living space on the entire planet. Not a forest, not the sunlit surface of the ocean, but the deep sea. The black water that begins around a kilometer down and drops for kilometers more beneath that. There is no light here, none at all. The last faint blue of the sun died out far above your head. The pressure would crumple a submarine like an empty can. The water sits just a few degrees above freezing, and it is almost completely empty. You could swim the length of a marathon in any direction and never brush past another living thing your own size. Now imagine that in this endless, freezing, pitch-black desert, you have exactly one job to finish before you die. Find a mate. Find one single other member of your own species in total darkness, with no map, no sound to follow, and a body barely longer than your finger. It sounds flatly impossible. And yet one animal solved that problem, and it solved it in a way so strange, so disturbing, and so oddly beautiful that when scientists finally worked out what they were looking at, some of them simply refused to believe it. This is the story of how anglerfish mate. If you've ever wondered how do anglerfish mate in a place where partners are almost impossible to find, the answer is one of the most extreme love stories in all of nature. And by the end of this, you will never think about the words attachment or commitment in quite the same way again. Let's start with the monster that almost everyone already half remembers. When most people picture a deep-sea anglerfish, they picture a nightmare, a round, dark, gaping mouth, long needle teeth that curve inward like the bars of a cage so that anything unlucky enough to swim in can never swim back out. Small, half-buried eyes, and rising from the top of the head, a thin, fleshy fishing rod, tipped with a glowing bulb of light that dangles right in front of that terrible mouth. That glowing lure is where the whole family gets its name. In water this dark, most creatures hunt by light, because down here, almost everything alive makes its own. The anglerfish turns that instinct into a weapon. A curious shrimp, a small fish, anything drawn toward that one lonely little glow in the emptiness swims straight for it. And by the time it realizes the light is fixed to a mouth, it is already inside. The jaws can gape wide enough and the stomach can stretch far enough to swallow prey larger than the anglerfish herself, because in a world where a meal might come once a month, you cannot afford to let anything escape. That is the creature in every documentary still. That is the famous demon of the deep. But here is the first thing almost nobody realizes. Everything I have just described, the lure, the cage of teeth, the fearsome size, all of it belongs to the female. Every single classic anglerfish you have ever seen a photograph of is a she. And to understand why that matters, we have to talk about that light, because the light is not truly hers either. That glowing lure is one of the most remarkable partnerships in the natural world. The anglerfish does not make the light with her own tissue. Instead, tucked inside the bulb at the tip of her fishing rod is a small fleshy chamber, and that chamber is crammed with billions of living bacteria. They are bioluminescent bacteria, microbes that glow, and the anglerfish farms them. She gives them a safe, sheltered home and a steady trickle of nutrients, and in return, they light up her lure so she can hunt. It is a living lantern, powered not by the fish but by the microscopic tenants living inside her. Scientists are still untangling exactly how a young anglerfish first gets colonized, because the bacteria appear to come from the surrounding seawater rather than being passed down from the mother, and the fish seems to have special pores and structures that invite the right microbes in and keep the wrong ones out. She can even control the glow, dimming it or flashing it by adjusting the flow of oxygen-rich blood to the bacteria, effectively switching her fishing light on and off. So a deep-sea anglerfish is really two organisms working as one, a predator and a colony of glowing bacteria hunting together in the dark. Hold on to that idea, two living things merging into a single working unit, because it is about to come back in a form you will not be ready for. If the female is a farmer of light, the male is something else entirely. The male is the horror at the center of this story. For a very long time, the male was a complete mystery. and he created one of the strangest puzzles in the history of ocean science. When naturalists first began hauling deep-sea anglerfish up in their nets more than a century ago, they kept finding the same thing: females. Big, toothy, lure-bearing females. Hundreds of them, across dozens of species. But they almost never found a male. It was as though half of every species had simply vanished. Where were the fathers? For years, nobody could answer that. And then someone noticed something odd. Many of the female anglerfish that came up in the nets had small lumps attached to their bodies, clinging to the belly, to the flank, sometimes near the head. At first, these lumps were dismissed as some kind of parasite, little leech-like growths feeding on the fish. Some were even catalogued as entirely separate species, a mystery creature stuck to a monster. It took a brilliant piece of detective work to see the truth. Those little parasites were not parasites at all. They were the missing males. The reason biologists could not find the males of the species was that the males had been right there the entire time, fused into the skin of the females. The male anglerfish had not disappeared. He had become part of her. So how does that actually happen? To understand it, stop picturing the male as a monster and start picturing him as something almost pitiful. In many of these deep-sea species, the male is tiny, sometimes only a few centimeters long, dwarfed by a female many times his size. The anglerfish male and female size difference is one of the most extreme in the entire animal kingdom. He has no fearsome lure of his own. His whole body is built for a single purpose: to find a female before he starves. He is often little more than a swimming pair of enormous eyes and a giant pair of nostrils, because in the black deep, his one hope is to detect a faint chemical perfume. A species-specific scent the female releases into the water, and then follow that single thread of smell across the darkness to its source. He can barely feed himself. In some species, his gut is so reduced that once he leaves the larval stage, he is effectively running on a timer, burning through his tiny reserves with no real way to refuel. Find a female or die. And when, against staggering odds, he finally does find her, he does the only thing evolution has left him able to do. He bites. He clamps his jaws onto her body and holds on, and that bite is the beginning of the most extreme act of union in the animal kingdom. Because once he bites down, in the most committed species, he never lets go. Not ever. His lips and tongue begin to fuse with her skin. Over the following days and weeks, the tissue where his mouth meets her body starts to dissolve and grow together, until there is no longer any clear boundary between where he ends and she begins. Their skin knits into one. And then something almost unbelievable happens at the level of the blood. Their circulatory systems connect. Her blood vessels join with his, so that he no longer needs to eat, no longer needs to breathe for himself, no longer needs to do anything on his own at all. He is fed, oxygenated, and kept alive entirely by her bloodstream, drawing everything he needs straight out of her body. He has stopped being a separate fish. He's become, quite literally, a living organ growing out of her side, permanently plumbed into her flesh. This is what biologists mean when they talk about parasitic mating in anglerfish. And once you understand deep-sea anglerfish reproduction at this level, the word attachment stops being a gentle metaphor and turns into a horror movie fact. And the sacrifice he makes to get there is total. Once he is fused and fed by her blood, the male no longer needs most of the body he was born with, so it simply melts away. His eyes, once huge for finding her in the dark, are useless now, and they degenerate, in some species shrinking away almost to nothing. His fins wither. Many of his internal organs shrivel down until they barely exist. He does not need a brain that navigates, or a gut that digests, or eyes that search. He gives up almost everything that made him a separate animal. He keeps only what the partnership actually requires, above all the parts that make sperm. In the end, the once complete little fish has been reduced to little more than a bump of tissue on the female's body, a permanent sac of reproductive cells kept alive by her blood, ready to fertilize her eggs the instant she is ready to spawn. He has traded his entire self, his eyes, his freedom, his separate existence for one guarantee that when the moment finally comes, he will be there. In the emptiest place on earth, he has solved the problem of ever finding her again by making it impossible to ever leave. So why? Why would evolution ever build something this grotesque, this self-erasing? The answer is written into the brutal mathematics of the deep sea. And once you see it, this nightmare starts to look less like cruelty and more like a kind of desperate genius. Remember where these animals live. The deep sea is the single largest habitat on the planet, and it is almost unimaginably sparse. Anglerfish are spread incredibly thin through that vast black volume of water. For a male, meeting even one female in an entire lifetime is a stroke of astonishing luck, a needle finding another needle in an ocean-sized haystack. Now imagine he finds her, mates in the ordinary way, and swims off. The odds that he would ever find another female, or even find this exact one again, are almost zero. He would most likely die alone in the dark, having reproduced once, if at all. Evolution despises that kind of waste, so in this lineage, a different strategy won out. Any male who, on finding a female, latched on and never let go, was guaranteed to father her offspring, not just once, but every single time she spawned for the rest of her life. A male who stayed left behind vastly more descendants than a male who left. Over millions of years, that ruthless arithmetic carved the male down from a free-swimming fish into a permanent attachment. Because in a world this empty, letting go even once could mean your entire genetic line ends forever. Why do male anglerfish fuse to females? Because the horror is really just the deep sea's answer to loneliness, and the strangeness does not stop with a single couple. Because there is nothing to stop more than one male from finding the same female. In several species, a female can carry not just one fused male, but several at once, 2, 3, sometimes more, all attached to her body, all wired into her bloodstream, all reduced to living sperm supplies. She becomes a self-contained breeding system, drifting through the deep with her mates permanently installed. An on-demand supply of fatherhood ready the instant conditions are right for her to release her eggs. Because he is so small, and so streamlined into her flesh, she can carry a small harem of fused partners without it costing her much at all. In the deep sea, a female does not go searching for a mate when she is finally ready to breed. She simply carries her mates with her, always. There is one more twist that scientists are still working to fully understand, and it may be the most mind-bending of all. Think about what fusion actually means at the biological level. When that male grafts his tissue into the female and joins his blood to hers, her body should reject him. In almost every animal, including us, the immune system is built to violently attack any foreign tissue that tries to merge with the body. It is exactly why organ transplants between humans are so difficult, and why patients must take powerful drugs for life to stop their own bodies from destroying the new organ. And yet the female anglerfish accepts a whole other individual permanently fused into her flesh without tearing him apart. Recent research suggests these fish have done something extraordinary to their own immune systems, dialing down or rebuilding key parts of the very defenses that would normally reject foreign tissue in order to make this permanent fusion possible. In other words, to invent the most extreme partnership in the ocean, the anglerfish may have had to partly disarm the immune system that every other backbone-bearing animal on Earth relies on to survive. To be honest, this is still an active area of study, and biologists are cautious about exactly how it works, but the direction is clear. It is a reminder that evolution does not care about elegance or comfort or what feels natural to us. It cares only about what works, and it will happily rewrite the deepest rules of the body to get there. So let's step back from the horror for a moment and look at the whole staggering picture. Here is an animal that lives in the darkest, emptiest, most hostile environment on the planet. To hunt, she grows a glowing lure powered by billions of bacteria she farms inside her own body, 2 life forms fused into one. To reproduce, she carries her mate or several mates fused into her flesh, sharing her blood, shrunk down to living organs, so that in a world where finding a partner even once is nearly impossible, she is never without one. Every part of this creature, the light, the lure, the cage of teeth, the fusion, the sacrifice, is an answer to the same overwhelming question that the deep sea asks of everything that dares to live there. How do you survive, and how do you keep your kind alive when you are alone in the largest darkness on earth? The anglerfish answers by refusing to be truly alone at all. She builds partnership into her very body at the level of bacteria and blood. We like to tell ourselves that nature is beautiful, and it is, but it is also stranger and far more ruthless than almost anything we could invent. The tiny male who dissolves his own eyes and gut and self just to stay beside a partner he found only once in the endless dark is not romantic, and he is not cruel. He is simply what survival looks like at the bottom of the world. And the fact that this is real, that right now, comatose beneath the waves, there are fish swimming through the black with their mates fused permanently into their skin, their lures glowing with borrowed light, tells you something important. The ocean is still full of solutions to problems we have barely begun to imagine, invented in a place we can barely reach. So here is what we want to know from you. Now that you understand what is really happening down there, what unsettles you more, the lure that turns a living light into a trap, or the male who erases himself completely, giving up his eyes, his body, and his freedom just to become a permanent part of the very creature he was born to find? Tell us in the comments. And if the deep sea just became a little more terrifying and a little more wonderful for you, then stay with us. Because the darkest water on earth is hiding stranger things still, and we are only just beginning to bring them into the light.